Look, I love the Johto region. It's the first region I ever played. It's a beautifully carved out locale in the worlds of Pokemon that just brings a wave of nostalgia every time I revisit. But take a look at this for 2 seconds to let me ask you, what was Game Freak thinking? So that's what we're doing here today. Our goal is to take every gym leader and Elite Four member in the Johto region and give them a team that's far better than the teams that they originally have. And I know what you're asking, Zame, why are you starting with the Johto region? Wouldn't it make more sense to do the Kanto region first? And you're right, maybe we could go back and make those even better too. But I have sat here and thought about for years now about some of the, I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of say embarrassing decisions that I feel like Game Freak has made. Duplicate Pokemon, severely under-leveled Pokemon, half of the gym leaders not having a single new Pokemon from Generation 2. There's a lot of relatively easy changes we can make to show off the brand new region. And that's what's gonna be our primary focus here, because gym leaders are supposed to be a test of skill. The first boss fight in an RPG. They need to test new players on the skills they've acquired to navigate through the region, and most importantly, help test the character's game knowledge. That means type matchups, status conditions, priority moves, gender differences. I could keep going, but I think you realize what I'm probably trying to say here. And it's safe to say that Johto does not do a good job at this, especially when you take a look at some of these Pokemon choices. I'm not exaggerating. The first mandatory encounter you are required to have with a new Johto Pokemon in Gold and Silver, barring your rival battles, is twins Amy and May in the second gym, and Bugsy, the leader of the gym himself, does not even have a Gen 2 Pokemon. So I have taken the liberty to redo every single gym trainer in the game, in which I hope is the best way to exhibit this to new players. And so let's go ahead and start with Daddy's favorite, Falkner. Now, Falkner isn't too crazy. I mean, he's the first gym trainer in the game. He's got flying types, which is a much easier challenge than Brock's rock type Pokemon in the first gen, but we have gotta talk about the two major problems with it. If you fought every single trainer on the previous routes and completed all of Bellsprout Tower, you should be way higher level than level 7. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna raise up Pidgey to be level 9, and then we're gonna take Pidgeotto and we're gonna replace it with Hoot Hoot. Now I'm gonna make this mandatory for all gym leaders to have a Gen 2 Pokemon, because doesn't that kind of make sense that you want to show off the new Pokemon for the new generation? And more than likely that Pokemon's also gonna be their ace, but there's gonna be an exception or two. As a game developer, it's your job to entice players to want to explore every breadth and inch of your game that you have, so you want to give them that eye candy to look forward to. I mean, Hoot Hoot is only available at night. It is very likely that a young kid who started playing right after they got home from school has never seen this owl Pokemon. Owls, which are famous for being nocturnal. Pokemon's kind of educational. Now, I did toy with the idea of using Noctowl instead of Hoot Hoot, but this is the first gym trainer. I do not feel comfortable with that much of a difficulty spike. Plus, if you compare Noctowl to Pidgeotto, I think that's too much of a difficulty spike for a brand new player. Plus, we've already raised Hoot Hoot by 3 levels, gave him the move Mud Slap since Falkner gifts you this TM after you beat him. Which also, why is the bird-type gym leader giving us a ground-type move? I also added Gust to Pidgey because since we raised it to level 9, it should have access to a flying-type move it didn't have before. And honestly, I think this makes for a relatively easy, yet mindful first challenge. Not to mention it implores you to go to the Bellsprout Tower, probably go out into the wild to catch a Bellsprout so that you can trade it for an Onix to take out the bird Pokemon, so it would help incentivize the player to explore the world more. Now, Bugsy, I do have to say, Scyther has gotta stick around. I just feel like it's too iconic to Bugsy. It's debatably the most recognizable strong bug Pokemon in the original Red and Blue, and it makes perfect sense for Bugsy to have him in the Johto region. See, the region of Johto put a huge emphasis on culture. While Kanto introduced us to the world of Pokemon, Johto helped flesh that world out, giving us a hefty helping of lore, culturally rich cities. If you stop and take a look at the region, nearly every nearby town has a nearby landmark that expands what you'd see if, you just went outside your house and touched grass. Scyther being right next to Elex Forest, a place known for where you have to cut down trees accompanied by a gym leader with Bugsy's scissor hands over here, only thing we're doing to Scyther is giving him a 4th move. Now, having Metapod and Kakuna, that's just unacceptable. You've got a plethora of different bug-type Pokemon introduced in this generation, 10 to be exact, and you decided to give the gym leader the 2 weakest ones. So what are we gonna replace this with? Shuckle and Heracross, we can already cross off. They are just way too powerful. And putting it beside of a Scyther that knows Fury Cutter is gonna lead to way too much frustration for a new player. Pineco, we're gonna acquire as soon as we get to the next city and learn Headbutt, so we do want to implore trainers to search for the new Pokemon that has a brand new mechanic attached to it. Ladybug or Spinarak, I think are both fine choices. You fight either of them as soon as you enter the gym to face twins Amy and May, so I think keeping either of them would be fine. However, I think the smartest choice would be to keep it like this. We're taking Kakuna over Metapod because Kakuna has access to Poison Sting. These are gym leaders. They are supposed to be trials to train and teach you the new mechanics of the game. Both of these Pokemon know String Shot, which acts as a stat debuff, but Poison Sting may also be one of the first times your Pokemon might encounter the effects of poison. I also think it's a smart idea to add some sense of familiarity to new and returning players. Like, we know you're very aware of who this Bug-type Pokemon is, so let's go ahead and add that to a Pokemon that you've never seen before, like Yanma. Yanma might have considerably better base stats than Metapod, but it still has an utterly useless moveset. Even giving the best moves that he can have for this level, I gave him Foresight, Quick Attack, and Leech Life. Because remember, it only does 20 damage in this generation, so I feel like this is the right choice here. Now, you could debate putting Spinarak or Ladybug in here, but I think it'd be wiser to spread those throughout the gym and trainers surrounding the area. I also debated giving Scyther Double Team, but I felt like this early in the game would be too frustrating to new players. And with the fact that we have a surprise rival fight right around the corner, I don't want to completely decimate the player. We also have Kurt right above the Pokemon Center, and I bet you're wondering, well, what does Kurt have to do with anything? Well, Kurt handles the apricorns, which can be found in special trees scattered around the region. However, those trees are home to berries. Now, I sat here for a long while and thought about it, and I decided not to give Bugsy any berries for Pokemon to hold. If we had to put a berry on a Pokemon, it would need to be Scyther, which would just make that more challenging. And adding a Pokemon with poisoning abilities, a brand new Pokemon with a priority move, Scyther with Fury Cutter, which strengthens each time it's utilized, I feel like that's throwing way too many things at the trainer at once. Plus, in this generation, the only berry that we have only heals 10 HP, so once we get to higher levels, that's kind of unnecessary and kind of silly in my opinion. I mean, if you're going up against Elite Four members and they're getting 10 HP, that doesn't really do too much of good. It also wouldn't do very well against our next fight, which, since we're about to talk about this, I want to make this perfectly clear, so I'm going to say this slow. Do not change a single thing about Whitney. My finger motion looks kind of weird there. Do not change her Clefairy that has access to Metronome and Encore. Don't change the Miltank with its advanced moveset. Don't change the gym that's shaped exactly like a Clefairy from the top. And especially don't change the temper tantrum this little brat throws when you kick her tail. This is the perfect first skill check of the game. It entices the player to go travel around Goldenrod because the level 18 and 20 Pokemon are quite a bit higher than the few trainers you see right underneath the daycare, since Elex Forest has literally 0 trainers. You can do the Team Rocket stuff, check out the underground, check out the giant section above, where if we actually showed off the Gen 2 bug Pokemon, you would be enticed to go and catch those you've seen along the way. Eventually, this would lead you to the trainer inside of the department store that will trade you a Machop for a Drowsy or an Abra, depending on which game you have. Now, as far as Morty goes, we have got to get rid of this onslaught of ghost Pokemon. Why does he have nothing but the Gengar line? I mean, I know why in a technical sense. He is in Egritique City, you know, the city with a giant burn tower where Pokemon, what's the word, died? There is a silver lining though, because that does make me take some Pokemon into consideration on what I would give him. So I decided to have him keep 2 of his ghost Pokemon, keeping Gengar as the ace because, I mean, it's Gengar, while also giving him 2 additional Pokemon to round it out. I kept Ghastly and Gengar almost identical. However, I did get rid of the Haunter with Nightshade, but I did want to transfer that over to Ghastly and replace Spite. Since none of the other Pokemon on his team knew Lick, another Ghost-type move, I thought this was probably the best case scenario to show off the variance of what is essentially a brand new type. I debated for a while whether I wanted to have Ghastly and Haunter or Haunter and Gengar, but I felt like one was too weak and one one was too strong, so I would imagine he would use the Ghastly as a baseline to train others in the gym, similar to how Brock would have a Geodude and an Onix. But I had to get rid of the 4 Ghastly line because literally every single trainer in the gym has one. So since characters in the gym already have Haunters, I feel like with all of the Ghost-centric trainers, it would feel anticlimactic if the leader of the Ghost-type gym didn't have the Ghost-type Pokemon. Now, as far as Mischievous, I learned something very interesting. Not a single trainer in the game has the only new Ghost-type Pokemon introduced. Like I said, there's some clearly choice decisions made with the Pokemon typings in Gen 2, and by choice decisions, I mean terrible, bad, poopy, just go ahead and chuck this garbage in the woods, why don't you? So, obviously, this means I had to replace one of the Haunters with the only Gen 2 Ghost Pokemon. I had the option to give Mischievous Shadow Ball, and I think it's still viable, but I decided to make it more of a setup Pokemon because of its lower stats, and the fact that Shadow Ball does 80 base power is still fairly powerful at this level. Now, I did give Mischievous Psy Wave as their only attack move because having access to a psychic move gives at least some sort of combat against normal types. Like, look at these moves. Morty has 16 different moves and not a single attacking move that can affect a normal type without setup beforehand. Regardless, I did actually give him an optional 4th Pokemon, being Coughing. Now, it's not a ghost Pokemon, but it's one of the most prevalent Pokemon in the Burn Tower where Morty is constantly visiting to communicate with the Pokemon around the area. It would only feel natural that he would befriend a Pokemon around there, and what would be the closest thing to ghost types while also making sense contextually to the Burn Towers? This also gives me the opportunity to give Coughing Destiny Bonds because none of the other Pokemon happen to have this move, and I also think it's kind of silly rage bait. Honestly, this fight seems like it could pose a little bit of a challenge, but not too difficult, but also seeing as if the fact that we also have another rival fight right after this, I think this puts this at a pretty decent degree of difficulty here. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on because we've got a lot of big decisions to make. Now, at this point, we have 3 different options. Olivine City's gym leader, Jasmine, is not actually the next gym leader since we would have to heal Amphi, so we then instead need to go see Chuck all the way in Cianwood and grab the medicine while we're there. Now, we could go to Mahogany Town and take on Pryce, but we can't take on Pryce until we take down the Red Gyarados, and once you take on the Red Gyarados, you meet Team Rocket, and Team Rocket has an entire story arc at this point. So we're gonna go ahead and put our focus on Chuck, the 5th gym leader, which is a sentence that nobody has ever uttered in the history of humanity. And this also makes good sense from a design standpoint because Gen 2 has one of the most thought out gym leader rotations in the whole entire series. We face Whitney, which perfectly counters all of the ghost types that are at Morty's gym. Morty's gym perfectly resists all of the fighting types that we see at Chuck's gym. Chuck's Pokemon are the perfect counter to the steel type Pokemon at Jasmine's gym. Steel types will then shatter the ice types at Pryce's gym, which will then freeze the dragons at Claire's gym. It's honestly really well thought out. It's just, what kind of happened here between these two? Regardless, we move on to Chuck's team, and honestly, part of it's great, but part of it's kind of sad. This is your 5th gym badge. You would expect to have more than 2 Pokemon, granted fairly durable Pokemon, no doubt, but I think that we can make this a little bit better. So I kept Primeape and Poliwrath exactly the same, except I lowered them from level 27 and 30 to level 26 and 28 respectively, so that we could add Heracross, one of the 3 fighting types added in Gen 2, as his ace. I didn't add Hitmontop or Tyrogue for Bruno reasons, which we'll get to later on, which ultimately leaves me no choice but to use Heracross. And that's a good thing. It's a Pokemon that we've probably not encountered because the only way that you can encounter it is by headbutting trees, and also, surprise, not a single trainer in the game also has a Heracross. This is a common trend in Gen 2. Don't be surprised when it comes back. Now, despite being a fighting type Pokemon, the soonest damaging fighting type move it can learn is Rock Smash, which is just useless at this level, and Reversal, which it doesn't learn until level 44, so we're kind of all out of fighting type moves here. Now, there was a special Heracross that you could get at the New York City Pokemon Center back in 2001 that knew Seismic Toss, which is the one we're going to use today, so we have a consistent base of damage and give some sort of spotlight on fighting type Pokemon. I also decided to give him counter because you're a big boy, you can handle it, and also, I just think Heracross is really neat. Now, Jasmine is my baby girl. She's literally my favorite gym leader of all time, and to be honest, we're not gonna have to change much about this. Steel is a new type introduced in Generation 2, so obviously we gotta include Magnemite to show that it's been given this additional typing. That, and I also like her having a Magnemite because she works so closely with Amphi in the Lighthouse, and I feel like electricity forms a key part of Olivine's identity due to that. But we are gonna replace the other Magnemite with Fortress because these two Magnemites literally have the exact same movesets. And yet again, nobody has a Fortress in this region. And before you get mad at me for being wrong, just keep in mind, I said region. Now in Generation 2, despite adding 6 new Steel-type Pokemon, there are only 3 new moves that were introduced, and both Magnemite and Fortress don't have a tail, don't have claws, and don't have wings. So, we're gonna go ahead and introduce the move Iron Head, which wasn't introduced until Gen 4. Magnemite, I'm not gonna give Iron Head, but I will go ahead and pop that baby on Fortress alongside Bide, Rapid Spin, and Explosion. I debated on giving it Spikes and being the first Pokemon in the party, but I feel like that makes the most sense for the new, oh, well that's a Steel type now. It also helps that you can find it on the route leading to Olivine City, which further implies that it's a very technologically sound city in which she should have a Magnemite. And Steelix is perfect the way he is. Now, he does have Sunny Day, which halves the effectiveness of water-type moves against it, but I mean, she's right beside the ocean, and Steelix's special defense is clearly its weakness, so keeping that, Screech, Rock Throw, and Iron Tail as the TM Jasmine gives you, I feel like this strikes the best balance to make her perfect. Which, I mean, look at her. She already is. Pryce is up next, and as long as you've done the Lake of Rage, then you can immediately challenge Pryce before you head to the Rocket Warehouse. Which is cool and all, but this gives us no excuse that Pryce's Pokemon are lower than Jasmine's, which, to be fair, I don't think it's that inoffensive, but you just caught a level 30 Gyarados. I think you'd want a little bit more of a challenge than a level 31 Piloswine with 5 weaknesses, 3 of them being your starter Pokemon. Despite that, we're gonna keep Piloswine as the ace and change the seal to a Delibird. Plus, we're gonna raise all of the Pokemon by a couple of levels just for safe measure. Now, I know Dugong doesn't evolve until level 34, but taking a look at the other gym leaders, half of them have Pokemon that have evolved far below their level anyways, so I don't think it's too much of a stretch. Piloswine I have left nearly the same, but I did change Fury Attack to Earthquake. If this was any earlier, I would have substituted the egg move Ancient Power for Earthquake, and I still feel like that's equally fine and reasonable. Between that and Blizzard, I think this can be a pretty intimidating battle. The saving grace is that Blizzard has 70% accuracy, and Piloswine, until it learns Icy Wind, is one of the slower fully evolved Pokemon in the game. Now, there are a couple of options when I'm coming to the third Ice type. Sneasel was my initial choice, but Silver uses a Sneasel in this party, and with its darker nature in Generation 2, I felt that Iconicity should stay with Silver. Smoochum is no. Lapras, I don't think fits the aesthetic of the old man, and Jinx is used by will of the Elite Four, so I think this little Santa Claus is easily the best choice for Grandpa here. As far as Delibird's Learn set goes, Icy Wind is the obvious choice since it's the TM Pryce gives you in the game. Delibird doesn't learn any flying type moves. I can't. Why am I about to fall? I can't. He's Santa Claus flies up into the sky. And you didn't give Santa Claus any flying type moves. So if I had to give it Peck, Drill Peck, or Wing Attack, we're gonna go with the middle option. And then for the last move, I had 2 options, Attract and Endure. Whitney already had a Miltank that knew Attract, which also matched her adorable flirty personality. So giving an old man Endure? You know, he's at the later stages in his life. I think he can handle it. I'm sorry, Pryce. You don't deserve some kid like me grilling you when you have much better things to worry about. Like life insurance. Anyway, Claire is our 8th gym leader, and I just want you to take a look at this and tell me what you think is wrong. Doesn't take a rocket scientist now, does it? So yeah, scratch that one out. You're getting 2 Pokemon instead of 3. Now, there are only 4 total Dragon-type Pokemon in Gold and Silver, with both of those evolutions already belonging to the Claire family. We already have some other options that we could use that are kinda like Dragon Pokemon, but someone's cousin's a bit of a selfish ass. So I deliberated this for a very long time, about 26 seconds in fact, and I've got 2 different solutions. One one, which is the option we're not going to do, is we can take a pre-existing Pokemon and turn it into a Dragon type, since there's only 4 total. And there's a couple options I could think of, but they are really big stretches. Larvitar, but like, I don't think that bodes very well, and 2 pseudo-dragons in a row wouldn't make sense. Gligar, which is like a baby scorpion, so with a slight redesign, it could kinda work. Dunsparce, because, well, honestly, I just thought it would be pretty funny to make him a dragon type, but I think that's way too much of a stretch, so instead, we're gonna go ahead and go with idea number 2, which is give her 2 different Dragonairs with completely different playstyles you have to try and overcome. Each Dragonair as it stands currently is set to effectively paralyze, then use Slam and one other move to whittle your Pokemon down, so I say let's keep one that specifically does that. As for the other 2, I combined them together and removed Slam since it doesn't have any secondary effects, and then I replaced it with Thunderbolt and Surf. Thunderbolt can handle any water Pokemon that have been taught Ice-type moves, while Surf can take out a Piloswine if you decided to pick one up while visiting Ice Cave. Now, the leading Dragonair, I decided to make them a setup Pokemon, giving them both Defensive Walls Reflect and Light Screen, while giving them Thunder Wave for immobilizing Pokemon and Dragon Breath since it's her official TM. Kingdra is Kingdra. I didn't really do much to it. Each of the Gen 2 trainers' aces in this game are the exact ones I'd actually give them. You know what? Let's give them a round of applause. I think they deserve it at this point, and I'm really happy with what I've done here so far. I want to be able to jump into a new generation and explore the game mechanics while showing off the new creatures that inhabit this world, and I think we've done a pretty good job of exemplifying that. Every single trainer has an ace. Each one has varied strategies as the journey gets longer and tougher. I feel the Pokemon are a good reflection of the trainers who use them. And most importantly, presenting the Pokemon in this way, I feel, makes the game way more exciting. I specifically remember seeing Roxanne and Ruby and Sapphire for the first time, seeing Geodude, the first older gen Pokemon I had encountered at the time, and then a Nosepass? I immediately wanted to go and track down who this little compass looking thing is. I feel like putting that sort of precision into the design of your trainers will help Pokemon trainers want to explore the world and get more enriched in the environment you're trying to build. But then we get on to every trainer's greatest challenge, the Elite Four. And while this may be the gauntlet for most trainers on their journey to be the very best, we honestly don't have that much work ahead of us. Most of these Elite Four members have a pretty good moveset, pretty decent levels. The teams aren't honestly that bad since they can work around the late game, but we're still gonna make a few changes. Thankfully, our first offender up is Will. He does have a pretty average team that can leave the player with a little bit of a challenge, but the one thing that sticks out to me is the fact that we have Slowbro instead of Slowking. Now, because we have the second Xatu here, I'm also gonna add an Espeon on here as well. We may have already picked up an Eevee in Goldenrod City and possibly even evolved it before we knew there was another evolution. So this will give the player the chance to know that it exists. Also, Karen has an Umbreon, so I kind of feel like they go hand in hand. Don't make the joke. I'm also going to make Espeon the lead and give it Future Sight. Now, Future Sight isn't learned by Espeon until Generation 4, so we're going to just ignore that again, but I've got something controversial to say about Koga. Nah, it's not really that big of a deal. We're just keeping Fortress. So no, Fortress isn't a poison type, and it's not like we don't have a plethora of other options to choose from. So the next obvious choice would be to bring in the Weezing he had from the Fuchsia City gym, but that's all the Pokemon he had. A Muck and a Weezing. So what other exploding Pokemon would be a great substitute? Well, Fortress makes perfect sense. He's a creepy little bug type, he's secluded and mysterious, he's closed off to the world. Who does that sound like? It would make sense that with the natural evolution of the Pokemon series, Koga's team would naturally evolve with it. But Bruno's team is just perfect. He ditches one of his Onix, he doesn't evolve the other one via trait evolutions, and while we could add a Primeape or Poliwrath to give them a team of 5, I like to imagine that Bruno uses the Onix to help the other 4 fighting Pokemon strengthen their own punches and kicks. And now we get to talk about one of the best trainers in Pokemon history.
Strong Pokemon, weak Pokemon. That is only the selfish perception of people. Truly skilled trainers will try to win with their favorites.
Now, how could you drop a line like that and truly expect me to change anything about him? Sure, I could swap out some of her non-dark type Pokemon for the other 2 dark type Pokemon, but Sneasel is one of the weakest Pokemon in the game that can be taken out with a Rock Smash, and Tyranitar is... well, I mean, it's Tyranitar. You don't really expect me to send out a pseudo-legendary for the second to last trainer in the game, and then give another pseudo-legendary to the final trainer in the game. We'll save that for the next generation. But speaking of our champion, now that we're finally here, I just want to have one word with a person who designs Lance's team. 3 Dragonites for the champion of the region? Really? I mean, I get the struggle. Like I said, there's only 2 families of dragon types to choose from, so you kinda gotta take what you get. But 3 dragon type Pokemon, with 2 of them only having a 1 move difference, I mean, I racked my brain for a good little while trying to think of how we could fix this, but then it hit me. The answer was so obvious. Just give him the 3rd starter Pokemon. Why not at some point, Professor Elm had a friend that stopped by to say hello, and then not mention to the player that the 3rd Pokeball just isn't there? Did Professor Elm hold the Pokeball so it couldn't be easily stolen? Did he trust another trainer with it? That speculation can and will go a long way in a 7-year-old's mind until they realize, wait, did Lance take this? So you take one of his Dragonites and turn it into a Dragonair, boom. Perfect team. I just don't feel like Lance has enough of an impact on the story as he does. This would be such an excellent opportunity to further emphasize how an elite trainer becomes a champion and furthers the idea of Karen right before, that you fight with your favorites. But these gym leaders supplement the region. I try to use all of these teams as a great way to expand Johto, to entice the player to travel around and find new Pokemon, while also keeping a good difficulty balance to help educate and challenge players to learn the new polish to the system. But who knows? Maybe Pidgey was Falkner's father's favorite Pokemon, so he uses it to hold on to the memories he has with him. Jasmine has a Steelix that's completely out of character from a soft-hearted, compassionate soul. And while we're at it, maybe Morty happens to have a hard-on for just the Ghastly line and doesn't want to train anything else. Or maybe, just maybe, the Pokemon selection here sucks. So Game Freak, if you're making Let's Go Umbreon and Espeon and you want somebody on your team, I am more than happy to